Nigeria is a country with mass population, hence the need for adequate access to health, employment, and education. Now, are these provisions readily available to the citizens? And are they way out of reach, and why? And how does non-interest banking play a significant role in curbing these issues? Hello and welcome to Islamic Finance Weekly. I am Rahma Sayyid Muhammad. I know I said on this month we're going to focus on fintech, but then I decided, you know what, let's talk about something pressing. Let's talk about something that's bothering Nigerians. I mean, the inflation and how everything has gone up. The cost of everything has inflated. Well, and that brings us to our topic of today, building sustainable infrastructure, ethical investment for socio-economic development. And my guest for today is Mubarak Abdul Hamid, the head development for Marble Capital Ltd. Hello, Mubarak. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for doing this with us.
Hello, today. I trust you're doing well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mubarak. Let's dive right into our discussion today. We're focusing on socioeconomic development, the infrastructural part of socioeconomic development. So let's talk about infrastructural deficits across different sectors. To a layman, what is infrastructural deficits and how does this apply, especially, how does this work, especially in Nigeria?
Okay, so infrastructure is basically those setups that you need to function properly. And giving more context, that infrastructure would be something that helps you to run, example, your roads help you to move your business from one place to another, or say your merchandise from one place to another. Water infrastructure helps to get the water from the source to where you can consume them. Other things like health infrastructure, the hospital facilities help the doctors or the health workers to deliver medical services to people who require them. So infrastructure are actually the physical needs or physical setups that help you to actually function properly. There are basically three needs of life, three basic needs that we have is building, shelter, clothing, and food, right? But then there are other things that are essentials for you to have. And these are majorly health, right? Education, roads, right? For you to move, because human beings are social beings and we're always moving, we're always migrating. So you need a path or you need a road that helps you to move. You do your businesses, you need a road that helps you to move your things from one place to another. So these are essential. Then you can now get to things that are luxury items. But then infrastructure majorly speaks to, in this context, would speak to the physical needs for you to get the essential things that you need.
Putting all these needs and essentials into cognizance, let's talk about the contributing factors to this infrastructural deficit. What are the things contributing to it?
All right. So because infrastructure, they are actually shared resources, right? So there are things that one person cannot build. And even if one person builds them, people from using them. So most times, all the time, you find that infrastructure built or maintained or managed by the government. Why? Because it is their job to ensure justice and social things available. If I decide to build my own road today and I use my money to actually build it, I could tell people to not take that road. But then if the road leads to another person's house, how do I now tell them not to get that? And that is why it becomes the duty of the government to take care of them. And that is why, because they are interconnected, that is why they can be very huge and can be capital intensive, right? It makes sense for us to build connected roads, for me to build and then join it to the road in front of the next person's house and then the neighbor's house, and then, have a connected infrastructure. And this makes sense, right? But then it means that I can't build it alone. That's one. Two, it means that it is capital intensive because we're building on a large scale. Now, because we're building on a large scale, it requires capital. And why we have infrastructural deficits, and infrastructural deficits would actually be us not having enough infrastructure that we need, especially when you're looking at the population of the country, right? We're about 200 million today. I'll give you an example. Over 70% of the federal roads in Nigeria, federal roads are roads that connect from one state to the other, or from major towns to the other. And 70% of them plus are actually in bad shape, right?
Right.
So because they're capital intensive, they can be overwhelming for whoever is building them, in this case, government, right? Building them. And also looking at the fact that the Nigerian economy is actually struggling currently, you now want to prioritize where government spending will be going into. Because building infrastructure takes time, right? It takes a long time for construction, and also for you to now get to use them, right? So this length of time that it takes makes it difficult for it to get done, right? And finally, and at the core of it would be financing, the access to financing, the structuring of financing, the management of the financing, right? So money flows in, the government has earmarked this particular amount of money to actually build this infrastructure, a road or a hospital or something. Where does the money come from? How quickly does the money flow to where it is needed? And how is it managed?
Now, this explains why for years you see an abandoned building and be wondering what's happening. Why isn't this building completed? What's stopping these people? Oh well, let's move on. Let's look at the need and justification for ethical financing. I mean, having all of these factors, all these contributing factors into play, into cognizance. Now, let's talk about non-interest finance or ethical finance. What's the justification for this type of finance, and how does this play crucial role to curbing these factors, especially in this part of the world?
So we're talking about the gestation period the other time and how it can actually affect. One thing about the gestation period is, for as long as you have taken a loan, say a debt financing, and that's majorly what we do currently in Nigeria, right? You have taken a loan to actually finance this project. For every year, you have to pay a return and interest on that loan. Either you are being able to use it or not. If you've been able to complete the project or not, pay interest. Right? And do not care if actually the financier does not care if this may impact or if you're able to finish the projects that you wanted to do. But in terms of ethical financing is a financing structure that is, yes, interested in the returns, but also interested in the impact of the project that you're financing on the people, or I don't want to use the word debtor, but then the person accessing the financing or the entity accessing the financing. Example, Nigeria is taking a loan from a particular entity. They're not only looking at the return from that loan over the, say, next 20 years, but they are interested also in the impact. And so you will see them coming to do an impact audit to see truly if this is working. If it's not, fine, turn it off. If it is working, then it's something they want to maybe encourage and improve on, right? And that's how ethical financing is. In that case, ethical financing is not, is a win-win situation, right? And the risk is not only carried by the person or the entity accessing the financing.
Okay. So having looked at all the importance and justification for ethical finance, now let's look at examples of ethical investment that one can subscribe to. I mean, the ethical investment in infrastructure that an everyday citizen can subscribe to.
Thank you. So there are various options for investing in infrastructure today, and it's a glad thing that the continent, Africa, is looking at development through another route, right? You see a lot of private equity firms coming up to solve the problem of financing, right? And you now see them doing local funds for funding or say for financing development, right? The first one, and the one that everyday person can actually key into, is the option of in Nigeria today, you have Sukuk, right? Meaning that myself and yourself are investing in the infrastructure that we want to see, right? The first
Right.
one is the federal government's, and that for now we have the FGM Sukuk 6, right, as at last year, which raised over 400% of the intended issuance size, right? And that means that ethical financing is getting more traction in the country.
Right.
People are getting benefits. Another structure that we have is concession, right? Last year, the federal government also signed a concession agreement with some private companies, to build and manage some roads, some major roads in the country, right? I mean, they would build it, manage it for the next 20 years, and then release it back to the government. Then it becomes the government's own. In this way, those private companies can go source for the funds, mostly locally, right? And build and then toll these roads. And after 20 years, they cede the ownership of the road to the government. So for the FGN Sukuk, for the Sukuk, mostly when you're passing on Nigerian roads, especially when you're going from one state to another, you would most likely have seen where there is a signpost saying this section is funded by Sukuk, what, either Sukuk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6.
Sure.
You would have seen. And it shows you that this section of the road is funded by the people who invested in the Sukuk, who gave money to the government to build this road. It also means that this road is owned by them, and the federal government is paying rentals to them. So that's a structure. For the private equity, I mean, for the companies that are on concession agreements with the government, the roads are owned by those companies. They are managed by those companies. The companies, I mean, the federal government is not renting it from them. They get the tolls, they manage it, they ensure that there are no potholes and all. And when those ones happen, after 20 years, they cede ownership to the government. Of course, you have roads to use. The impact is that you have roads, you have the infrastructure that you need, right? In terms of education or health, you see private businesses today setting up infrastructure, health infrastructure, food and water system infrastructure, education infrastructure that they manage by themselves, but then that are open to the public. Example, you have privately owned libraries that are open to the public, managed by private companies or private individuals. But then reason is, when you leave many of those things to just be handled by the government, there are a lot of other things that are requesting money from the government, right? There are a lot of other things that the government wants to spend on. And most times, this infrastructure don't bring immediate cash flow back to the government. And because of that, the government sees them as not necessary right now, because the government wants to also make funds and so that they can pay back.
Okay. I love that you said you're not just getting returns from investments, you're also having this kind of self-fulfillment, that you have invested your money in an ethical way and your money is being used in an ethical manner. So you know your money isn't just being wasted on anything. Okay, let's talk about how to get involved. How do people get involved in ethical investment? I mean, how can I access, me as an individual, how can I access this form of investments?
All right, thank you. So there are fund management firms in the country, right? One of which is Marble Capital, where I work. We have as well, the conventional ones, and also the Sharia compliant, or say non-interest financial institution, right? So for you to access, or for you to be able to invest in these instruments, you can place a call to them or reach out to them and ask them for which investments they have, right, available, or ask them to notify you when they have these kind of investments available. That's one way. The second way is if you want to invest directly, which you still have to go through a financial institution, perhaps the custodian for the issuance, right? You have to be attentive and look out for information about these issuances. The federal government treasury bills is coming out and they're using it to invest in a particular thing. But the sweet part for ethical investment is there is knowledge of what it's being invested in. There is good corporate governance, sorry. So that's why I would more advise the ethical investment options, and that would be the support for federal governments, the non-interest commercial paper for federal government, some governments as well, then some businesses as well, right? An example of that commercial paper is the AFEX commercial paper that is being used to improve or to develop the agricultural, also food system. Like I said, another way is to reach out to fund management firms, one of which is Marble Capital Ltd. We have others as well. Let them inform you when these instruments are out so you can invest. That's two. Third one is you can always reach out to them. The mutual funds most times are live funds. They are funds that you can go in at any time, right? So you reach out to them and tell them you want to invest in a mutual fund, is investing or that is focused on infrastructure, right?
Thank you so much, Mubarak, for that. I'm sure viewers will be interested in, listening to something like this because it has to do with something that affects an everyday person and every aspect of our lives. So thank you so much for shedding light on this for us.
Thank you very much.
Well, we've heard from a professional's mouth, and hardly can we escape mentioning ethical investment without mentioning sukuk. You're either working on the road or driving down, you probably see sukuk 1, sukuk 2, or sukuk 3. Isn't that your cue to join Islamic finance or ethical finance? Well, that brings us to the end of Islamic Finance Weekly today. Don't forget to keep it to date with us next week on the program. Follow us on all our social media platforms displayed on the screen. Thank you for watching. I am Rahma Said Muhammad.